Call to order the Harbor Commission for this March 21 meeting. Jeanette, would you call the roll, please?
Betsy Kramer.
Present.
Bill Spicer.
Here.
Eric Friedman.
Here.
Frank Kelly.
Here.
Jim Sloan.
Here.
Helene Webb. Here. And Corey Bantelin is absent.
Are there any changes to the agenda, Mr. Eidman?
Madam Chair, there are no changes.
Okay. This would be the time of public comment on anything that's not on the agenda. Seeing none, I will close public comment. Next is approval of the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Minutes are approved. This point, department update. Mr. Eidman.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, in terms of council action, the City Council approved a resolution to the State of California requesting a grant in the amount of $21,000 from the California Department of Boating and Waterways for maintenance of a sewage pump-out facility in the harbor. And I just signed the paperwork on that today, so that's moving forward. Additionally, yesterday the Department of Boating and Waterways also approved another $1.9 million installment of our grant for the Marina One project, Phase 5. And Carl flew to Sacramento to represent the department and make a presentation to Boating and Waterways. There is a $7 million already identified in the governor's budget for the Santa Barbara Marina One project. So we're looking good on future funding for phases 5 through 8. So this will be the first installment of 5 through 8. And in terms of tentative agenda items for the April meeting, we'll be having the Clean Marina report. Okay. So moving along to the parking committee meetings. The parking committee, Commissioners Kramer, Webb, and Spicer have been participating in some publicly noticed meetings that we've been having. I just wanted to report out on those meetings. Just in terms of background for the public and for the commissioners who aren't on the committee, we have 2 permits that the waterfront sells: a $95 a year general permit, which can be sold to anyone in unlimited quantities and has a maximum parking limit of 72 consecutive hours in the harbor main lot. It's valid in all the parking lots, waterfront lots, except for Stearns Wharf. The second kind of permit is a $70 a year slip holder permit, or blue permit we'll be talking about. It's sold to slip holders and business owners only. It's limited to 1 vehicle per slip or business, and slip holders are exempt with those permits from the 72-hour limit. Go ahead. The concerns that have developed among staff are that storage vehicles are permanently occupying parking spaces for storing materials, tools, clothes, etc. This is with the blue permits, often in the form of step vans that are packed with this sort of thing, and rarely, if ever, move from the lot, except for when we do once a year operability tests to make sure they're operable. There's another factor we've talked about, and that is the long-term storage of vehicles, not necessarily full of personal possessions and tools and so forth, but just vehicles being stored in the lot, some of them by out-of-town or maybe even out-of-state owners. And these vehicles also do not move very often. There's another problem associated with the red permits, and that's becoming more and more evident, and that's the storage of vehicles that have no connection with the harbor. We see this with the red general permits, and we're seeing more and more people storing multiple vehicles in the harbor main lot. So the public perception is that camping and vehicle storage is allowed in the lot, so we're constantly making public contacts and dealing with this issue. The question of why now has been raised at the committee meetings. Why are we dealing with this now? And this graph, I think, illustrates it. We're seeing significant increases in days where the lot reaches full capacity. Now, admittedly, when I say full capacity, that's not full capacity for 24 hours. That's full capacity at the peak time of usage. Generally, on weekends, it may be from 10 to 2 or noon to 4. But as you can see by the graph, last year we had unprecedented 32 days where the lot reached maximum capacity, and this is even after the Decor oil workers had gone and were no longer using the lot for their vehicles and the crew transport operations out to the oil rigs. The overriding concern is that vehicle storage is poor public policy and inappropriate in the Harbor Main lot. It usurps everybody's ability to use the lot, including slip holders, fishermen, liveaboards, and patrons of the harbor businesses which help fund the waterfront enterprise. This is just an example of the step vans over by the launch ramp. That's pretty much typical on any given day. We photographed approximately 36 blue permit stored vehicles and 34 red permit stored vehicles, and inventoried them. I have the photos with me tonight. This next one is has permits on it dating back to 1986, so it appears that it's been in the lot for quite some time. And again, it's a storage vehicle, not a step van, but another form of storage vehicle for personal possessions. Those first group of vehicles were mostly associated with liveaboard storage or stored vehicles, the so-called blue permits. But we also have non-liveaboards using these blue permits to store things as well. We'll show that in the next couple of slides. This one's a fishing associated with commercial fishing. This next one is on temporary cancellation status. That means the vessel associated with the slip is no longer in the harbor for a minimum of 3 months. It's either out on a trip or out for repairs. But the vehicle remains stored in the lot, along with 2 others associated with the same slip, including this Volkswagen, which we've cited because it has the red permit. So it's moving around in the lot. This is another example of a non-liveaboard vehicle being stored in the lot for years at a time. This is a former liveaboard, no longer a liveaboard. This is not a liveaboard vessel. It appears to be more of a mobile sign for the mini market. This is an out-of-state licensed vehicle. We assume it's just stored here until the owner comes into town and has a convenient vehicle waiting for him. And this is also a former liveaboard, not a current liveaboard. Vessel is no longer in the slip. Some of the other issues raised at the parking committee meetings were the Santa Barbara City College parking is a big part of the problem. Actually, it's not. The Santa Barbara City College parking permits are honored in the Ledbetter lot and in the Harbor West lot. So that's primarily where those vehicles park. And it's primarily off-peak season, Monday through Thursday, and the first 6 to 8 weeks of the fall and winter semesters. And the cars are moved every day. They go away every night. They're not stored in the lot. Occasionally at the beginning of the year you might see some vehicles moving into the Harbor Main lot, but they have to pay the hourly rate, just like the general public. The City College permits are not honored in the Harbor Main lot. Another issue that came up was the need for bike storage. At the first meetings, several people mentioned that they needed the vans to store their bikes in. And so at the meeting we discussed what we discussed at this commission meeting a while back. Carl had a presentation that we installed 14 bike storage lockers around the harbor exclusively for liveaboard use. And we were able to offer them to 36 liveaboards on the wait list. And last I checked, there was 1 offer pending and no wait list had formed. But that was a week or so ago. I'm not sure what the status is at this time. But we did work on addressing the need for additional secure bike storage. And if it comes down to it, we can probably shoehorn in a few more of those bike storage lockers if that's what this discussion seems to key in on. The conclusion is that liveaboard permits do not include storage. The $140 a month liveaboard fee is just an additional fee in addition to the slip fees. Liveaboard fees have not been increased in 9 years, nor have parking permits been increased in 6 years. We discussed BAP concerns about loss of service to boaters if business activity permit owners were not allowed to store their tool vehicles in the lots, and we were able to address that. There's really only one BAP operator out of 70 that has a blue permit and actively stores his stuff, his tools of the trade in the lot. And that ultimately, at the end of the day, the workaround is to keep the vehicles operable and moving, so they're not just occupying one space for years and years at a time. So the discussion is, first of all, it's a twofold approach, and which would be policy effort, municipal code change on one level, which would be something along the order of eliminate the unlimited parking for the slip holder permits, or some other modification to the municipal code to rein in the abuse of the blue permits. The other prong of the twofold attack is the increase of enforcement of the 72-hour limit on general permits, and that's in progress right now. Enforcement has started with chalking every vehicle in the harbor lot and citing the red permit violators, not the blue permits. Some people may be surprised to see their blue permitted vehicle chalked, but we're chalking all of them just for efficiency and speed, then going back 3 days later and checking them for red permits. If they're there, they're being cited. And the first citations in this program went out on Monday morning. Another thing I'd like to point out, too, at the meetings, something that's come up every so often is fees. We don't want to pay any more fees, or this is a fee-related issue. And I've never, in these discussions, raised the issue of this is a revenue generator or a fee issue. And it's very important to point out that the Waterfront Department does not get revenue from parking citations. We don't see any of that. The cites are sent up to the police department once a week, and from there they're processed, and my understanding is most of the revenue from parking citations goes into the court system. So none of it comes back to the Waterfront Department. So it's not about writing a bunch more tickets and somehow making that a profit center. Next. Okay, again, tonight this is just a discussion item. Just like to remind the Commission and the public, it's not an action item. There's no recommendation. It's just merely a summary of the discussions that we've had to date at the Parking Committee level and at the Commission meetings in January and February. Again, what we were looking at and what we floated at the Commission meeting, at the committee meetings, but we haven't settled upon, is continuing the slip holder liveaboard blue permit discount, but eliminate the 72-hour exemption. The second part of that is allow a 72-hour exemption up to 14 days within certain limits based on ocean travel and other travel for those with liveaboard permits with advanced notification to the parking department. And now I italicized, bolded, and underlined the word notification because that's all we've been asking for, is that you call in, email in, and say, my vehicle is going to be in the lot. I'm going away for X amount of time. Just pure notification. Is not asking permission, and it keeps getting twisted around into this, why would I have to ask permission for the Waterfront Department? And in a side note, one of the gentlemen at the second meeting, last week's meeting, mentioned something that's already on the books. In fact, if you leave your, rule number 15 on the slip permit is that if you leave your slip, if you're absent from your slip for more than 5 days, you shall notify the department, and notify the department with 3 days before you're to return. So this is along the same lines as that. It's notification, not asking permission or getting authorization. And then finally, we would want to build in discretionary exceptions for longer periods with approval, extenuating circumstances, you know, something that has a reasonable explanation and needs some longer kind of accommodation. We need to put some strong sideboards on this, but there has to be room for some discretion in it as well. Not everybody fits into the same box, but still we really need to start nibbling away at the abuse of these storage vehicles and stored vehicles. So finally, if you're interested in getting one of these vehicles, there's one on Craigslist right now for $1,500. It's up in Lompoc. Again, no action to be taken tonight. We're looking at right now at enforcing what's in place. That seemed to be the consensus at the last meeting, committee meeting. And there is, I'd like to again emphasize, there's more work to be done before a policy recommendation can be brought forward to this commission. So that concludes my report on the parking item. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Scott. I think the way we will proceed, we have 3 speaker slips from the audience, and then after that, it'll come to the commission for discussion, but this is not a vote. I guess we have 4 speaker slips. And The first one is Bennett Gertz. And you have 2 minutes.
Great. Hi, my name is Barrett Gentz, and I just moved back to Santa Barbara in June of this year, of 2012, actually. And I am a full-time librarian employed in Summerland, and I'm also a part-time artist. And previously, I'd rented studios and whatnot to support my, artistic practice. And I'm trying to do it out of my boat right now. It's kind of difficult. I definitely am in a process of filling up my minivan with stuff. However, I drive it to work every day. Given that when we live in the marina, it gets really tight, especially on some of the tiny boats, and it's quite difficult to have any sort of, if you pay the premium for a liveaboard space, having some sort of space to keep some of your, functional, like your garage type materials, there is no place to keep those without having to live amongst them, and it creates a living situation that's difficult on boats. I mean, you can keep so many tools, but it's difficult to actually have a livable space. And the liveaboard permit cost is, it's affordable. However, we're there because it's affordable. And when things, if we had to start paying for storage lockers and whatnot, things would get very expensive, and I'd be wondering why I'm there in the first place. But that being said, it's a wonderful space, and I know that given some room for extra sideboards and whatnot in this agenda, I think there could be room for people that pay the premium and might be in need for it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Lorraine Brandt.
Good evening. My name's Lorraine. I am a permittee. I've had a slip for 5 years.
Could I have you pull your mic down?
Yeah.
I am a single mom. I lived on my sailboat for 5 years. I'm putting my daughter through college, and I did have a storage van. Actually, it's still in the parking lot, but I sold it because of the controversy. I don't think that curtailing the blue permit back to 15 days is a fair justification for trying to solve a problem that may or may not be as big as it's made out to be. I'm not saying that there isn't a problem, but I don't know that the solutions that you're exactly suggesting are fair for people who have heavily invested and made this their home. So there's a petition here I spent about 2 hours on. There's about 30 signatures. A lot of people don't even know what's going on. They're very upset, the ones that do. And the people that didn't care were basically not of the working blue-collar class like a lot of the people in the marina that are in there utilizing the space and the permits. They're people that are affluent that are parking at the yacht club, and they didn't care. But there's a lot of people that didn't know about it, and I think that we definitely need to do more research and really look at why this is going on, and is it really a problem? I mean, 33 days? I don't know. I mean, it seems like it's a problem, but is it a big enough problem to revoke somebody's privileges and access to their home that, I mean, we've invested heavily. I mean, some of us, you may not think it's a lot of money, but it's everything that we had.
I'm sorry, could you wrap it up, please? It's getting a little bit beyond 2 minutes.
But like I said, I did sell the van. I bought a bigger boat, and I'm trying to do the right thing. I don't think that taking away the long unlimited parking should be down to 14 days. I mean, there are people that utilize that permit in a different fashion. The fishermen, teachers that travel, they go away. They've bought their permits and their slips and are heavily invested, and they've made lives there in the marina, and now it's being totally taken away. And it's going to negatively impact more than just, a few people that seem to be pushing the envelope. And I think you should address those people individually rather than the large scope.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Gary Longaberger.
Madam Chair, Harbor Commissioners, waterfront staff. This is a complaint generated, I understand, and it is something that needs to be addressed. But we also need to look at the complaint because not all complaints are equal. And if you look at it, let's look at the stats. If you do the math, in 2010, 3% out of 365 days were impacted. 2011, 5%, and 2012, 8%. Is that a big issue? No, but it would be good to address that time period and see if we can't free it up. How is having these vehicles leave for after 72 hours, how is that going to help? It's not going to help under those 8% time. Even if it goes up a little bit, it's not going to help. Why? They're going to come back on that busy weekend, on that holiday, on that sunny day, and they're going to be there before the tourists and the rest of the general public. So it's not going to solve the problem. The problem's not going to go away. However, any good complaint has a solution. And I think the solution is looking at, one, Long Beach City College. They could use the revenue. Here's this huge parking lot underutilized on the weekends and holidays because the students are gone. Let's open that up. City College could use the money. They've been impacted by the budgets. The other thing to look at is there are 6 parking spots in the harbor right next to the Maritime Museum right in prime time. And there is no availability. They're not utilized on the weekends or after 5 p.m. I understand that some of them should be left open in the case that they need to be used, but all 6 just going vacant doesn't make a sense. What they did was there's 2 other spots, which would be a total of 8, 2 other spots.
Over 2 minutes now.
Okay,
Sorry.
designated for maintenance trucks that says they're only going to be there between Monday and Friday between 8 a.m. 5 p.m. while they're there. So I'd like to see something opened up so that you don't have people moving their cars 72 hours and using their boat less than what they're using now, because that's going to be the impact. Fewer people taking their boat out, and as it is, most people don't use their boats. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the final speaker will be John Payne.
Good evening, commissioners and staff. My name is John Payne, and I've been fortunate to live in this harbor long enough to almost lose track. I graduated from UCSB. I've sailed a lot of places through the world. Currently, I'm raising a family aboard. I live the farthest dock from land. We affectionately call Siberia Dock. If you ever want to come for a walk, check it out. I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. My wife is a junior high school teacher at Santa Barbara Junior High. On Monday morning, you might find me emptying vessels' holding tanks. That's an exciting job. Wednesday afternoon, you might find me climbing a 100-foot mast into the air to fix something on the top of Taxi Dancer. Friday morning, you might find me getting some electronics ready for a vessel that's going, I don't know, to Hawaii, other places. So I'm in the harbor a fair bit, you might say. I'm glad you guys had a nice laugh at the step van. Because I feel like you're laughing at me. I have a step van. I've had a storage van in the parking lot for a very long time. So I am the problem you're looking at. I applaud who spoke before me that said, look, if it's become this big of an issue, I'll get rid of the van. And I pledge before you that I will do the same. It's especially, obviously, from your chairs looking at how I live, it's indefensible, so I won't even attempt to do so. But when the pendulum swings so far towards notification versus permission, and this many days you can sail, and so on and so forth, you're going to see the ire of a lot of slip owners raised. So I paid a transfer fee, I pay possessory interest tax on a slip permit, I pay my liveaboard fees, I paid dinghy storage fees, I have another storage unit that cost me thousands of dollars. So I'm not an indigent person, and I don't appreciate being laughed at. I work very, very hard to make it in this town, and I encourage you to hear the voices of the sea captains and the voyagers and the free spirits, if you will, down in the harbor that are going to take a fair bit of offense to having their parking privileges completely changed very radically and feeling like they're not part of this process. I thank you very much for your time, and good day.
Thank you. Okay, there being no other speakers, close comment at this point and bring it back to the commission. Any of the commissioners have comments? Commissioner Kelly.
Madam Chair, fellow commissioners, I'm not part of the Parking Commission, so I just wanted to make some observations that I hope the committee will consider as they pursue their deliberations in this project. It is a maximum capacity issue which happens in the middle of the day on beautiful days. I would challenge anyone on a beautiful day to go to any harbor or any beach and find adequate parking. Doesn't happen. It's not there. Whether you're in Los Angeles, Seattle, San Francisco, the Jersey Shore, New York, Houston, Florida, there's not enough parking. There are more people when the sun is out and it's beautiful than there is parking in the beaches. That's not an issue. In 1990, the Waterfront Center wasn't what it was today. It was a community center. You went in there and played basketball. You voted there. That's the kind of thing that happened. Brophy's did not exist. Beach Chuck's wasn't there. Endless Summer Cafe wasn't there. Breakwater Cafe was not there. There was no parking issue in the harbor, ever. So what has happened is that due to the success of some businesses that are in the harbor, at the peak times, there's not enough parking. If we're going to consider the problem or consider a solution to the problem, let's really focus on what makes the problem. It's not the slip holders. It's the success, primarily, of 4 businesses during the peak days of the summer. And those 4 businesses bring in 300, probably 400 cars, bang, all between 11 and 3. I'm not talking about Memorial Day or the 4th of July or Labor Day, because then everybody comes to the beach all day long, and there's simply not enough parking. But on the other peak days, it's primarily people coming to those restaurants. So what if the Harbor Merchants Association tried to address the problem from their point of view and said, what if we figured a way to assist our customers rather than going and parking in the parking lot? What if we, and I'm just throwing out an idea, what if we surcharged every ticket 25 cents and had a staff of 12 valets, and we put something up that said restaurant parking, and you came there. There was no parking, but there was a gentleman, like in most restaurants in downtown LA or New York or any other large city, there is no parking. You drive up. There's a little stand. You hand your keys to a guy. He gives you a tab. Your car disappears. And then those cars were taken to the community college parking lot and did not go in the main lot. So now we have a lot of additional parking during the peak time because the cars are being diverted elsewhere. I do thank you very much for the stepped up enforcement. I think that's something that we've been remiss with. And I would like to see us address this issue by moving one marker at a time rather than changing a lot of markers, because then we won't know what's actually creating the effect that we want. And I would want to say something to the general public that might be listening, and that is, and I think this has been made by the committee, but all of this discussion has nothing to do with permits which are currently issued, if I understand this point correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Riedman. Every permit that's out is valid through the end of the year. This will be in the new year when the changes would take place. So there's going to be a long lead time before something changes. Something else we might want to consider so that it makes enforcement easier is if we are going to change days, is everyone takes a ticket. Now we don't have to tag cars because that car or that van, and there should be no distinction between a step van and a roadster. It's a legal vehicle that can go in and park in a parking spot. But when that vehicle leaves, there will be a timestamp on the vehicle, so we'll know exactly how long it was in the lot. If it was a red vehicle that hadn't left in 21 days, they're going to have a very, very large parking bill when that vehicle finally goes out. And I would hope that the committee would not truncate dramatically the blue parking slips, because those are ocean dependent, and if we look at the master plan, ocean dependent, ocean related. I cannot get to my vessel by parking in a downtown parking garage easily. The vessel is in the harbor, and the harbor main is the way I would access that vessel. So these are just some ideas that I had that hopefully the parking committee can utilize. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. And I'm going to request that there not be applause. Thank you very much. Other committee members, please. Commissioner Sloan.
Boy, I don't have anything quite like that. I just have a couple of simple questions. How many red and blue permits are there out there?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sloan, I believe we sell about 700 of the blue slip holder permits and about 3,000 of the red general permits on your average year.
Have you given any thought to how someone would give notice that they were gone for 2 weeks? Will it be online? Will it be a phone call? How would you keep track of all of that? Have you given any thought to that yet?
We have some time to think about that, but we've considered phone line. It's currently on the books. It's in the municipal code that you can do that, and it occasionally comes into play with Sea Landing in the Santa Barbara Sailing Center, and they typically fax us something. Once in a while, Sea Landing will have a research trip for a couple of weeks or something. But we've been talking about a dedicated phone line, email that would respond to you. Thank you, we've received your email. And we're in the process of developing a new website, so something, as many means as we could to make it as easy as possible to do the notification.
Commissioner Sloan, if I could just add one thing to what Scott said. I want to remind respectively of what he mentioned earlier in his director's report on this item, and that is that while we want to be able to facilitate, and also he said we're in the early stages of this policy discussion on blue permits, while we want to do everything we can to facilitate folks going away for, a couple of weeks, there needs ultimately, to make any good sense policy-wise, there needs ultimately to be a sideboard, an end board on that. And so that's sort of where, the way we're looking at it, we would draw the line between authorization, contacting the department and notifying them versus gaining some authorization. If you're going away, I'll be frank with you, we had an individual at the parking committee meeting who mentioned, this is difficult for her because she goes to New England to visit her family for 3 months. I'll tell you from my perspective, that would not be something that I would, and I'm not the director, but that I would tend to authorize. So I'm just use it as a point to illustrate the fact that there needs to be some kind of sideboard, or we're not going to make any policy headway at all. We want to do everything we can to help and support and back the individuals who have legitimate reasons, the John Paynes of the world, or the Gary Longabergers are going sailing, fishermen are going fishing for 2 weeks and what have you. But there comes a point when somebody's on temporary cancellation for 2 years, you got to draw the line somewhere, and that's what we'll be wrestling with over the next couple months.
Thank you.
One last,
sorry.
I'm sorry, one last thing. On that, those pictures that you showed there, how many cars are on there, or potential long-term, non-moving users of harbor spaces?
About 36 that are more or less storage vehicles, and about 34 that are red permitted. 36 blue permitted, 34 red permitted, approximately.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Spicer.
I am on the parking committee, but I'm speaking right now as my opinion. It's very evident that the harbor parking touches many people in our community, and I've also heard an awful lot of stories, and I don't believe there's one size fits all solution to something that I see is a growing problem. One common theme that I have seen throughout all this, and that appears to me to be generally accepted by most folks, is that the lot was never intended as a place for storage vehicles. It was as a place for long-term storage for vehicles. It's also of my opinion that I believe that before we change the rules or make new policies, we need to enforce what's on the books. Specifically, I'm referring to the enforcement of the 72-hour for the red permit holders. And what I'd like to see is a 90-day period of stricter enforcement, which I understand we are underway with. And during that time, so staff could gather data to see how well enforcement is working, determine if it assess the data, see if it has affected the problem, determine if there continues to be challenges, and bring this topic back up at a later date, probably the July meeting. So that's my thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. Commissioner Friedman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank the members of the public who spoke tonight. It's important for us as commissioners to hear your voices and your concerns, and I appreciate you coming out tonight. One question for staff is the citation process. I've heard many different things on what happens after 72 hours currently. I've heard everything from after 72 hours, they'll tow your car to you get a ticket. So could you clarify what happens now, since we're stepping up enforcement, so there's clarity to the public on what happens? And then in terms of if and when this comes back, I'd like to get an analysis of what comparable jurisdictions provide, such as Ventura, San Luis, maybe Santa Cruz, on how they address this type of issue. And one other issue was the one car in particular that is registered out of state. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have a car in state, it needs to be registered in state, correct? So if they're still registered out of state, that's another issue we can deal with separately, because that seems like it's an anomaly that there's other ways to address it outside this process. Thank you.
Sure. Madam Chair, Commissioner Friedman, typically, let's say you got your tire chalk today. It's 72 hours. If you hadn't moved your vehicle, you would get a citation and a tow warning. Okay? In another 72 hours, if you still hadn't moved your vehicle, you would get another citation and the vehicle would be towed.
And what's the
That's two full cycles.
what's the citation? Is there a dollar amount?
It's about $48, I think.
Thank you.
Commissioner Webb.
Thank you, and thank you for coming. I appreciate the public comment. And I think in beginning this enforcement that it would be good to post that we're strictly enforcing the 72 hours, perhaps on the kiosk as people come in, because it hasn't been enforced regularly in so many years that it could become a shock to people who don't read the papers or know what's going on. And also I would like to apologize to the slip holders if any way these reports and these photos have maligned the perception of the people who live in the harbor by the community, that they're losers and users. And as we all know, they are not. They're very responsible people, and that we respect and know that about the boating community. And they're also very, I think, self-regulating. And we have someone who's already sold her step van. So I think with this increased enforcement, we should see how it plays out, and that people, I think, will work together and try to solve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. So, any other comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Bantalin?
Sure. First, I apologize for being late this evening. I think, it's a very complicated issue. Like another commissioner said, I don't know that there's a one-size-fits-all. I do agree that it wasn't intended to be a storage space, for that kind of price particularly. But I do, question whether or not there will be a capacity issue if we do have stricter enforcement. And I think, like others have said, we'll see how that plays out. And so then I think, it becomes a bigger question if there isn't a capacity issue, is there a blight issue? And I'm not saying that there is or not. And I think some will say yes, some will say no. And so if that is an issue, could we look at vehicle standards? If that's not an issue, then, we're just looking at capacity. And so, to me, it hasn't really been brought up, but I think there's kind of been undertones of that. For folks, is it an issue of blight or is it simply an issue of capacity? And so, to me, I think it'd be nice to know if we're just looking at one or we're looking at both.
Thank you. Commissioner Spicer?
Sorry, one quick follow-up for Mr. Reedman. Now that we've begun a stricter enforcement, and I know that there was one individual that was particularly upset, but have we had any, I guess, what has happened since stricter enforcement's been put in? Is there any anecdotal data?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Spicer, not at this time. I think a few vehicles have moved out. Some of the folks, the fishing vehicle that had all the nets on board, I think that one's gone. We heard tonight another one is gone, but that wasn't because of a citation. I think the awareness is coming out that it's not okay to do this. Many people will probably try just to move the vehicle back and forth within the lot, which is also not legal, just to move it into another stall. So I believe 15 citations were written on Monday. That's all that I have right now.
And Commissioner Bantalin? Okay, I was going to make comments. We in the commission did meet, and we basically came up with the suggestions that you do enforcement, which has been mentioned here. We've been concerned that there hasn't been. We also thought that, as has been said, that people shouldn't be demonized, as Commissioner Webb just brought up, and concerned about the liveaboards. And we felt that, as Commissioner Spicer said, that this enforcement should go on for at least 90 days and come back and report to us. And I'd rather like to summarize what was said about that, because I think Frank Kelly brought up a lot of important points this evening, and basically that the question is a capacity issue, as Commissioner Bantalin mentioned, and should focus on what makes the problem. And I would suggest to Frank that he put this in writing to you, so because he had a lot of points which were hard for me at least to make notes on. And Bill, Commissioner Spicer, mentioned that there's no one size that fits all, so I would emphasize that that would be our points. So thank you. And thank you for being so thoughtful about this. Any other comments? Commissioner Bantalin?
Just had one question for staff. Is there any staffing issues with increased enforcement? Are we fine as far as their regular duties? It is a big lot. Folks can try to move back and forth, and so I'm just curious if that's going to present any problems.
No, Commissioner Bantalin, that continues to be brought up at the commission meetings too, is that how many people will you have to hire to get this done? And the answer is none.
I guess at this point, we move on to the facilities management report. Oh,
Madam Chair, since this is
excuse me.
all of our sort of last bite at the apple for a while, we're gonna sort of take this hiatus and work on the enforcement side and then tackle the policy side. I just wanted to make a couple of points, if you'd be so kind. First of all, just so we can sort of excise this from the equation and moving forward, we heard at the parking committee level, and we heard again tonight, how individuals are paying a premium for a liveaboard. I think it's not unwise for all of us to remind ourselves that if you add up water, electric, trash, garbage, and janitorial services, liveaboards are pretty much subsidized. So nobody's really paying a premium for a liveaboard. And it's really, I don't say that to speak negatively about the liveaboards. I don't mean to demean their perspective. I just don't think necessarily it's an important part of the equation of what we're looking at with this problem. Second of all, to Mr. Longenberger's comments when he's talking about the increase in the percentages, 3, 5, 8, and it speaks to Commissioner Bandelon's question about is this a capacity issue. I think one of the corollary issues that needs to be looked at and considered is this a trend, and that's the very reason we're here, is because of this trend. And at some point, you sort of have to act. If you don't, the trend becomes more and more onerous. Finally, I just want to remind folks that from staff's view, and particularly my view as the manager of the Safety and Security Division of the waterfront, that this is partially about, it's really not about blight, though it is a blight, in some people's eyes to see a lot of step fans down there. But we're not, as somebody mentioned at one of the parking committee meetings, we have no intention of being the beauty police. If that were the case, I could think of a whole lot of boats down there that would be on the cusp. But when we talked about a capacity issue, but it's also an issue of what is and what isn't good public policy. And I think we have to consider that. I think we have to think about what the Coastal Commission intended, what the State's Lands Commission has intended, because remember, we manage this in perpetuity for the state of California. And we have to try and think about what is their intention. If you look at the Harbor Master Plan, there's a lot of language in there about recreational vessels and fishing being the primary, uses of the harbor and the ones that are the ocean-dependent uses that need the most support. Liveaboards, we've drawn a line where the State Lands Commission suggested we should at around 10%, so we support about up to 113 liveaboard vessels. Happy to do that, proud of our liveaboards. They are the eyes and ears on the water, but does that really necessarily mean that they should have the privilege of a storage van or a garage, if you will, in the lot? I put that out there just for everybody to think of on the other side of the equation, because we have a lot of thinking to do as to how we're going to work through this in a manner that's not only satisfactory but represents good public policy.
Thank you very much, Mick. And Commissioner Sloan.
I'm sorry to drag this on, but, I've heard a lot tonight about it being a capacity problem only. Well, it's not just a capacity problem in my mind. It's where in the harbor these things are. I happen to have a slip in Marina 4, and I go down there a lot, and there's a whole bunch of those spaces taken up by vehicles that never move. And so I have to end up, driving to the clear other end of Harbor Main lot to park. And so, yes, it is a capacity issue on busy weekends, but it's where the concentration of those vehicles is also. And I think from what I've seen, there's more down at Marina 4 than there is anywhere else in the harbor. So,
Thank you. Anybody else? I guess now we'll move on to Facilities Management Report. Mr. Freiberg.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. AIS began dredging this week on the spring cycle dredging, which is the 6th and final cycle of a 3-year contract with the Corps of Engineers. Contrary to what we found during the fall cycle dredging, there appears to be very little sand available, which is not surprising considering the mild winter we've had. We've had no large swells, very little rain, as most people know. Nevertheless, they'll dredge what they can and finish up probably about the middle of April. Whenever they finish the spring cycle, they usually do a little bit of extra work along the end of the break sand spit and dredge out an area where they moor the dredge for the remainder of the summer. They'll also might do a little bit of dredging at the end of the rock groin, where we found some unusual shoaling that we think was a result of the crazy currents we had during the tsunami a couple of years ago. when they finish in April, they'll demobilize everything, since this is the end of the 3-year contract. That means everything goes off West Beach, all the pipe is off East Beach, and everything else. So there'll be no sign of the activity other than the dredge moored off the end of the sand spit for a while. This summer, the Corps of Engineers will prepare a new contract, a new bid package, and go out to bid late in the summer and award a new one in the fall. At this time, they have not released the President's budget, so Scott and I have not been informed of how much funding is available next year. We've been told that we're in the President's budget, but as we all know, the federal budgeting process is a little difficult to get a handle on. So we'll report back to you when we find out what that is, and keep our fingers crossed that we're still in the budget and there'll be adequate funds to continue. Moving on to Marina One. Perfect. We recently finished Phase 4 of the Marina One replacement project, which included L and M fingers. This is our 4th go at it, and it was pretty much business as usual with demolition of the existing docks and a pretty empty-looking area. It looks pretty unusual with all the docks gone. Bellingham Marine Industries was the contractor. They bring all the docks into the launch ramp, float them over, and after about a week and a half, you've got all your docks back. It was very impressive. They did a very good job this year, moved very quickly through these 2 docks. M Finger went on for about 7 weeks. That included 1 week off for the Christmas holidays, and L Finger took about 6 weeks. This is quite a bit quicker than we've done in the last few years. So now that we're done for a while, they've really honed their skills, and when they come back, hopefully they won't forget them. The final cost for this phase was $1,530,000 and was part of a contract for phases 2 through 4. We've completely finished phases 1 through 4, and we're done with this contract. We had, as Scott had mentioned, we'd received a loan of $7,201,000 from the Department of Boating and Waterways, and now that we're done with phases 1 through 4, our actual costs were $6,330,000. We're under budget by about $870,000, and a lot of that has to do with a line item we put in there for escalation that allowed the contractor to kind of sharpen their pencil and submit a good bid, knowing that if inflation affected construction costs, they'd be able to kind of recapture those costs. As we all know, the economy has been very, very flat, so they only used about $50,000 of that $350,000 available. Our change orders were also very low, so it's nice to come in under budget. And what we do is we actually borrow the $6,330,000, although we have authority to borrow more. But this project's only halfway done now. We'll be moving on to Phase 5, J and K fingers. Phase 6 is H and I fingers. Phase 7, E, F, and J, and F finger includes also an extension of an addition of 8 slips. And Phase 8, the final phase, was $1.9 million. As Scott mentioned, we have submitted a loan application for $7.3 million to the Department of Boating and Waterways, including engineering and the construction. And yesterday, we were fortunate enough to receive kind of the first installment of that, $1.9 million. The engineering is on the order of about $300,000 for all the phases. We'll do a single bid package again for all of them. And the construction of Phase 5 is about $1.6 million. And it's important to note that we'll go out, we'll do a single bid package, we'll get our bids back. That's when you know how much a project costs. Right now, we're all just speculating and estimating. And at that time, we'll have a better handle on how much more money we may need to loan and whether or not we can actually fund the outlying year phases, maybe Phase 8 out of our capital funds, which would reduce the amount of money we borrow in our corresponding debt service. An important point to make is since 2009, we've had very limited slip availability with our visitor slips. On any given day, we have 80 to 90 slips available between the 30 visitor slips that are required by the municipal code and about 50 to 60 slips that are available through temporary cancellations. It's been a big impact to us, and we've seen what we think is a corresponding reduction in visitor slip revenues. There also may have something to do with just less boating activity with the downturn in the economy. But Mick prepared a press release the other day, released to some of the boating magazines, and trying to get the word out that we're capable of accommodating visiting boaters. We'll be for the next couple of years. So we'd just like to get the word out that we're open for business and want to get folks back up and enjoying Santa Barbara. And that concludes my report this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Carl. Are there any questions from the Commission? Commissioner Spicer.
Thank you, Carl. On the budget for the dredging, just remind me, is this the usual dance you have to do, waiting for the federal government to release a budget? And Is there anything that we need to be worried about?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Spicer, it's the same process. It's a 3-year contract, but an annual appropriation by the federal legislature and approved by the president through his budget. We frequently, I'd say usually, operate on a continuing resolution, which is just a stopgap budget that's adopted by the president and Congress. We have been reassured repeatedly that Santa Barbara's in pretty good shape and should be in the budget. It's important to note that last year Ventura was not. They were excluded from the president's budget in dredging, and they had to patch together some money through the South Pacific Division, not the LA district, but the whole entire division, to get money together to do a small dredging job in Ventura. So that is not a good precedent, and so it does concern us. We've met with our lobbyists and made everybody know how important it is to keep dredging Santa Barbara. So, knock on wood, we'll get the funding that we normally get.
And barely related follow-up. With the increased pangas we see, we're talking about having a federal presence here. Would that behoove us and work in our favor so that there's less risk of losing our dredging?
Yeah, absolutely. Every federal nexus we can come up with, that Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary, commercial fishing, everything. When we meet with the colonel, which we do on a regular basis, it's the commander for the LA district, we talk about these things, and we really roll out the red carpet for ICE, immigration, customs,
Homeland Security.
Homeland Security, sorry. We're trying to let them know that, we can accommodate their needs as far as enforcement and interdiction to the extent that we possibly can, and we let the federal government know that we're available for them for all those needs.
Commissioner Webb.
Thank you, Carl, for your report, and good job on M and L. That did go well. And do you have an idea of when Phase 5 would start?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Webb, I'm sorry I neglected to tell you, next year, FY14, about this time, we'll do the design for Phases 5 through 8, and if everything goes according to plan, we'll do construction on Phase 5, J and K Fingers, about the same time, 2 years from now.
Commissioner Sloan.
I have 2 questions. The first one's related to the dredging, and we go through this every time we do it, but is now the time to look at buying that pipeline or doing something else? I know we talk about this every 3 years, but and sometimes more often than that.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sloan, we do talk about it. The Corps wants to make a level playing field, so they require the removal of it. They are willing to fund all the dredging from beginning to end, all the infrastructure associated with it. So they haven't really put any pressure on us or suggested that we provide some of the infrastructure, although the talks are always kind of ongoing and fluid. If they got a little more concerned about that, perhaps we would look into something like that. But at this time, at this contract, everything will get removed with the understanding that the Corps would pay for all the infrastructure to be replaced.
Right. I understand that they pay for it. Who generates that RFP? Do we, or does the Corps of Engineers?
The Corps of Engineers does it solely. We're just a client agency. We really don't have that much to do with it.
Okay. The next thing I have is on the Marina One. We said we came in $871,000 under budget. Congratulations on that. What do we do with that? That's money that we've received, or is we haven't drawn that amount down, or how is that accounted for?
As you put it, we don't draw it down. This is like a home equity line of credit. The loan's available, and we only draw down what we need. So that's just money we won't borrow and won't service the debt on. Boating and Waterways may leave it available to us for future phases. We have one agreement that we have 2 amendments for. So we're going to suggest we keep going along that route.
Great. That's a clarification I needed. Thank you.
Commissioner Kelly.
Thank you. Excellent report, Carl, and thank you for saving us the money. When I look at the diagrams, I just, for the first time, and I apologize, I noticed Fish Float South does not look like it's in this project. Is that considered part of Marina One, or is it some? I know you can't walk there. How does that figure into the repair and maintenance of that whole area?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Kelly, Fish Float North and South are not part of Marina One. They're not part of this project. Fish Float North we replaced in 2005. Fish Float South was several years prior to that. Not one of our better projects. The docs kind of list. Yeah, but they're not that old. They're not even 15 years, maybe close to 15 years old. But they would get replaced as part of a capital improvement as they deteriorate and degrade, but as a separate standalone project.
Okay. And is there any way to address the listing? That, I guess, is where I was going, because that made me think maybe these docks are old.
There is. That's a pretty big dock. You can do them on some of the smaller docks. We do put floats under that we can inflate with air and adjust. We haven't done it. It's a commercial fishing dock, and the commercial fishermen are so accommodating. They don't complain, so we really haven't pursued anything. It's something we'll have to keep in mind because we can't let it get too bad, and we want to make sure, you know, their docks are as good as anybody else's. It just so happened that they're very accommodating and they don't complain.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any other comments? Thank you very, very much, Carl, for your report. Now on to the harbor operations.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, good evening again. Well, as we'd like to think, there are typically 4 seasons in a year, but at the waterfront, we really think of it as 2 seasons. Dredging season, which Carl is thankfully wrapping up, and boating season, which is upon us already, especially a spring where we haven't gotten much rain. And that kicked off officially for the Yacht Club on March 13th with their, on March 3rd with their gala breakfast and regatta, and Wet Wednesdays kicked off on March 13th. And that is a true sign that the yachting and boating season has begun. Wet Wednesdays will run through October 16th. Anybody belonging to an American U.S. Sailing Association recognized club, for that being the Santa Barbara Sailing Club and the Yacht Club in our harbor, is allowed to participate, and anybody can crew on those boats. First race 5:10. The barbecue afterwards is a lot of fun. If you have questions, feel free to call the Yacht Club at 965-8112 or visit their website. But Wet Wednesday season is upon us. And so is fishing season. March 1st is an important date for a lot of our local recreational fishermen. It marks the date when they can fish for rockfish for up to 50 fathoms deep. For the last 3 months of the previous year, the rockfish grounds are closed. So that's a big deal because rockfish is a staple of our local fishing fleet, recreational and otherwise. And if you don't have your own boat, it's not a bad idea to call Sea Landing. You can get them at 963-3564 for reservations, or you can contact Pat Henry, our property management specialist, who can hook you up with one of our business activity permit permit holders who does 6-pack charters. So there's a lot of good fishing to be had, and the channel fishing is good, and so is it at the islands for rockfish. So this is a great time to get out there, weather permitting. And on the Fish and Wildlife front, I wanted to bring to you an item about the Fish and Game Warden stamp. It is. I apologize. I missed the Catamaran Beach permits. My apologies, Brian. One other aspect that indicates that boating season is upon us is that the Cat Beach permits will go on sale the first Friday in April, on April 5th. Known as Cat Beach at the east end of Ledbetter is where we allow the placement of up to 60 catamarans. And you can get your permits. They're only $200 a piece. You can get them at the waterfront office beginning Friday, April 5th. They come down. The end of the season is April 31st. But for nearshore boating enthusiasts, this is a great way to get to the ocean with your catamaran right there next to the Yacht Club at the western end of Ledbetter Beach. Excuse me, the eastern end of Ledbetter Beach. And now on to the Fish and Game Warden stamp. You know, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, formerly the Department of Fish and Game, is promoting a program pretty heavily that it began in 2010 but flew a little bit under the radar for a couple of years. It's a program they hope will better protect their wardens and support their officers in the field. It's an interesting deal. That California Fish and Game Wardens are woefully understaffed, to be quite frank about it. And they average about 1 warden for every 200,000 citizens in California. And so considering the breadth of territory they cover on the ocean and on land, they're spread really, really thin. And not only spread thin, but they are spread thin in personnel. They're spread thin on resources. So what they've established is a nonprofit association, the Fish and Game Foundation, Fish and Wildlife Foundation, through which they fund programs by the purchase of a $5 Department of Fish and Wildlife decal, which you can put on your car. What do they use that money for? It's kind of like the fire association, the city of Santa Barbara's fire association. They get the stuff that they can't get through their typical budget. And for these folks, it's bulletproof vests, it's surveillance gear. You got to remember, a lot of them are out in the wild, and they're coming up on hunters to check their license. They're out in the wild by themselves, coming up on an individual holding a shotgun, asking them if they're complying with the law. And so they have a need for these resources. You can go on the website, on the California Department of Fish and Wildlife website. It'll guide you to where you can purchase one of these $5 decals. And from everything I've read and my communications with department personnel, this is very, very important to the officers in the field, to their safety and to their ability to do their job. They're also, in these days, you mentioned pangas before, they're also out surveilling marijuana grow fields on public lands, grow fields that are often guarded by, heavily weaponized cartel interests. So these folks need this money. The decal goes to a good purpose, and I would highly encourage folks to go online, find out where you can get a stamp, and if you don't see it online, ask at your sporting goods store, and they'll surely be able to tell you. And finally, on a bit of a sad note, though it had a good ending to a degree, on March 9th, an off-duty firefighter from San Francisco noticed a blaze of smoke coming out of the windows of the pilot house of the Condor at Sea Landing, and dispatch, Harbor Patrol and fire were both dispatched to the scene. Harbor Patrol, because we were right across the harbor, arrived first, and with Patrol Boat 3, they were able to take the bow monitor. This is why we test it every day. They would take the bow monitor, able to squirt water over the dock, up to the wheelhouse of the Condor, through the window, and put the fire out. It was a great save. It was about $500 worth of damage. That's the bad news. The Condor is down in Ventura being replaced, but I spoke with Chris Callahan, the manager of the landing, yesterday, and he told me they're actually anticipating getting the boat back by mid-May or early June. Most of it be insurance covered. So it was a pretty hot inferno, but it was put out real quickly between our guys and the firefighters who came and did the hose line work to put out the rest of the fire and check all the hot spots and secure it after it was over. And that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Mick, for your report. Now, are there any questions from the Commission? Commissioner Webb.
Thanks for your report, Mick. I was at the boatyard, and the fire truck came into that part of the harbor during that day rather than going straight to Sea Landing. Why did that occur?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Webb, per our protocols, there were fire engines that went to Sea Landing as well, but per our protocols, the fire trucks, at least one engine company comes to the accommodation dock or comes into the inner harbor, where we stage one of our fire boats to carry fire personnel to the fire so that we can work jointly with them using hose lines, bow monitor, and what have you. So it was per protocol.
Anybody, any other comments, any questions? I guess that concludes that. Thank you again for your report, Mick. Moving on. Now we have a public request from the Santa Barbara Wildlife Care Network. And Jeanette, would you read the recommendation, please?
Recommendation that Harbor Commission receive a presentation from the Santa Barbara Wildlife Care Network.
Thank you. And
I'm Carrie Rogers. I am a board member of the Santa Barbara Wildlife Care Network and just recently elected vice president of animal care. The Santa Barbara Wildlife Care Network, incorporated as a nonprofit organization in 1988, rehabilitates wildlife as permitted by California Fish and Wildlife and federal fish and wildlife regulations. The network receives over 3,000 animals per year that are at risk, orphaned, injured, sick, or oiled. Most of the animals are brought to us by members of the public and city or county animal control. SBWCN relies heavily on volunteers to capture, transport, and care for songbirds, seabirds, small mammals, reptiles, and raptors. SBWCN could not accomplish its mission to help wildlife in need and return them to the wild without the assistance of many organizations in the community, including the Harbor Patrol. We are fortunate to have many species of seabirds in our coastal community. Many of the seabirds that are reported in need of help beach themselves on the boat launch ramp, the sandy area at the end of the boardwalk, past Sea Landing, the sand spit, and the pier. The Harbor Patrol, as time permits, makes sure that dogs are on leashes and that the birds are not being harassed when they're trying to rest. When approached by people or dogs, they will dive back into the water for safety. The Harbor Patrol has been able to capture many of these seabirds, known as pelagic birds, those who spend most of their time in the ocean. Grebes, loons, cormorants, and pelicans that have become oiled from natural seeps, injured from fish hooks or fishing line, are too quick to take refuge in the water, making their capture difficult. If the Harbor Patrol has the time and ability to get to the bird to net it, the bird is placed in the crate and SBWCN is called for pickup. There are other rehab organizations in the community, and they sometimes rescue seabirds that end up in odd places: apartment buildings, middle of the freeway, parking lots, yards, and inland areas. Other organizations that are permitted to rescue and rehab wildlife are Marine Mammal Center, serving Santa Barbara, Channel Islands Marine Mammal and Wildlife Institute, serving Ventura, Animal Rescue Team in Solvang, and OHA Raptor Center. And now I'm going to turn this over to another member of our organization.
Hello, Madam Chair and Commission. My name is Julia Parker. I'm the Director of Animal Care for Santa Barbara Wildlife, and I'm going to tell you what happens to the animals, or mostly the seabirds, after we're able to rescue them from their predicaments. Once at the center, a bird is given a physical exam. The bird's body temperature is taken. The bird is weighed and warmed on a heating pad if necessary. If the bird is in stable condition, it is fed. If the bird is oiled and not stable, it cannot be washed. Only a blood test can determine if the bird is strong enough to withstand the washing process, which can take 20 or 30 minutes. Once the bird is washed, it is put in a net bottom pen with a hairdryer placed upon it. The next step is to put the bird back into the water and check its waterproofing. If the bird's feathers become wet, the bird is dried and the process is repeated until the bird preens sufficiently to become waterproof. The bird must be able to stay in the water for 48 hours continuously without becoming wet. If the bird's injury is treatable, such as a hook or a line entanglement, the foreign objects are removed, wounds are treated with disinfectant, and antibiotics may be prescribed. Compound fractures or broken bones at the joint indicate the need for euthanasia. However, conditions of fatigue due to malnutrition can be treated, as well as severe parasite loads. In the winter, storms may cause stress-related injury, and in the spring, juvenile pelicans flying over from their breeding grounds on Anacapa Island suffer weight loss as they learn to feed themselves. Environmental conditions may also play a role in the availability of food. Wildlife rehabilitators receive ongoing training at conferences that are held once a year. Wildlife organizations such as the California Council of Wildlife Rehabilitation, the National Wildlife Rehabilitation Association, and the International Wildlife Rehabilitation Association, as well as the Oiled Wildlife Care Network, help staff and volunteers develop skills in the field of rehabilitation, from wrapping broken bones, hydration, wound care, and extensive training in oil spill response as it applies to treating oiled wildlife, seabirds as well as mammals. OWCN provides conferences as well as online webinar classes and workshops to prepare volunteers to care for wildlife that have been contaminated by oil. This information is useful for rehabbers on the Central Coast due to the abundant natural seeps in the area. In the event of an actual oil spill, the Coast Guard would assume command, and the site is considered a toxic area as well as a crime scene. Anyone wishing to respond to an oil spill must be a volunteer associated with a permitted wildlife rehabilitation organization in order to undergo training required to respond in an oil spill. And we're hoping that the public some of the members of the public who are interested in helping respond in an oil spill take this to heart, because one of our fears is that if there is an oil spill in this area, people will run out and try to help animals without protective gear to help themselves and keep themselves safe as well. And at this time, I would just like to conclude and say Santa Barbara Wildlife Care Network would like to thank again the Harbor Patrol for their partnership and assistance in rescuing wildlife, and we look forward to a continued alliance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Julia. Any questions from the Commission? Commissioner Spicer.
Thank you for your for the presentation and for what you do. Any statistics or percentage of birds that once you get to them, how many survive or are able to go back into the wild versus the ones that don't make it?
Yeah, it's about, we have about a 60% rate of release after we rescue them. And last year we took in about 1,200 seabirds, around 3,000 animals overall. And I believe about 600 of those were released or transferred for continued care. This year we're already up to 375 animals received, and about 170 of those are seabirds. And we've already visited the Harbor Patrol staircase to pick up many seabirds in the little kennel cages that they make us available to us.
The Commissioner Sloan.
Again, thank you for what you do and for the presentation. Can you just remind the public what to do if they're on the beach and they see a wounded bird or something like that? And then also, what should boaters do if they come across one out on the ocean, or fishermen that might have a bird entangled in their fishing line inadvertently?
Well, what the public can do is call us at our helpline, which is 681-1080, and you can leave a message, a detailed message with your name, phone number, and a description of where the bird is found. Some people, when they visit the beach, they have their, a lot of company with them, dogs and children, a big family. They don't have the time to intervene, or they may not feel comfortable intervening. Other people will stand by the bird and wait until a volunteer rescue transporter arrives. The best thing to do is to try to keep dogs away from the bird, because once many of these birds are on the sand, they're helpless, basically sitting ducks. They can't move, and they're pretty much vulnerable in every way. So in some cases, covering it with a towel or even some newspaper will greatly reduce the stress of the animal. If by chance you have a beach towel or a sweatshirt or even a brown paper bag that you're willing to sacrifice, and you call us, we can tell you how to safely pick up that bird without injuring yourself, because most of them have very long, pointy, sharp beaks, and they don't know you're trying to help them. They think you're going to eat them. So we want people to be safe. Many people are more than willing to try to capture the bird safely and put it in a box or a bag, or wrap it up in their towel and bring it to us. Boaters, if they have a net and they feel inclined and have a safe place to keep the bird, can do the same thing, net the bird out of the water. As far as the fishing hooks and fishing line go, unfortunately, many times the line is just cut, and sometimes there's too much line and the bird gets even further entangled in it. So that's a hard call, because once the bird has the fish, the hooked fish, in its mouth, it's going to try to swallow it, and we do get many birds with fish hooks in them, and sometimes they can be surgically removed. But in a worst-case scenario, if you can't, pull the bird up, and in some cases you can cut the line and remove the hook. If you're talented and have a pair of wire cutters, many people do that, and then just release the bird. If you do have to cut the line and you can still capture the bird, call us and we'll help the bird out.
Commissioner Friedman.
Well, again, I just wanted to say thank you for being here tonight and informing us and public who's watching on what to do. On a number of occasions, I've been down in the harbor and seen birds with fish hooks or other impairments, and now I put your phone number into my contacts on my phone, so now I know who to call if I'm down there, and I hope everyone else put the number in there too. It's pretty easy, right. And because I'm sure we're all down there enough that we've seen the very type of birds that you're talking about. And thank you for all you do.
Thank you very much.
And I have a question, Julia. I assume that you want that the network wants volunteers?
Yes,
and,
we are always
and
need
you have
volunteers.
Training and so forth for them?
We train volunteers. We have an orientation training session. It's very simple to become a volunteer. You can visit our website at www.sbwcn.org, and you can download an application and bring it to our center at 1461 North Fairview Avenue in Goleta. Or you can call us, or you can just come by and we'll give you an application and set you up in your training and orientation. We only require 2 to 4 hours a week. Pretty soon we'll be open 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. when all the baby birds are demanding to be fed every 1 to 2 hours. But we need volunteers all year round. And our phone number again is 681-1080. We also partner with a lot of veterinarians in the community, and if you find an animal and it's after hours, you can drop it off at the Care Emergency Hospital. And if Goleta's too far to go, you can also drop off at Cat and Bird Hospital.
Thank you very, very much. It's been a while since Mick Kronman and I and June Taylor worked together to get signage down at the harbor and at the Stearns Wharf, I think 10 years or so ago that we first began doing that. And what's been particularly encouraging is the cooperation between the waterfront and the Wildlife Care Network. And thank you very, very much,
Thank
Julia,
you.
for what you're doing. Commissioner Bantlin.
I just wanted to thank Julia and Carrie for their presentation, also for all the work you do, and also for staff for coordinating this, but also Commissioner Kramer, because I happened upon a barn owl who we think was poisoned while on a bicycle ride on the 101, and without you bringing it up at several meetings, I probably wouldn't have known who to call, but I did know who to call, and they came out and picked it up, so I just appreciated that.
Very good. I'm glad you did. And I have one final question. What happened to that pelican that the Harbor Patrol rescued on Saturday?
You know, people often call and say, what? We get so many birds in every day, and often maybe 5 or 10 pelicans in one day. So I apologize because I don't know specifically about that case, but right now we currently have 6 pelicans, and they're all doing pretty well. We've got 4 cormorants. One did swallow a hook. It's going down to San Pedro for surgery. And we always assign every animal that comes in a number, and we'll give you that number so when you call back you can ask how, 255 is doing, and that will help us in tracking the animal.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot. So I guess next out we move on to the item number, well, I'm not sure what the item number is, but the fiscal year 2014-15 operating budget recommendations. Jeanette, would you read the staff recommendations, please?
Recommendation that Harbor Commission A, receive a staff presentation on the Waterfront Department's proposed fiscal year 2014 and fiscal year 2015 budget submittal. B, recommend approval of a $25 per linear foot slip transfer fee increase in fiscal year 2014 and fiscal year 2015 on all slip categories except 20-foot slips. C, recommend approval of a 2% slip fee increase in fiscal year 2014 and fiscal year 2015. D, recommend approval of a parking fee adjustment in self-pay lots from $3 for 3 hours with a maximum of $7 per day to $2 per hour with a maximum of $12 per day. And E, forward a recommendation to City Council for approval of the Waterfront Department's proposed fiscal year 2014 and fiscal year 2015 budget and incorporation into the city budget process.
Thank you. Mr. Reedman. Or is it Mr. Bossy?
I'll take this one.
Okay.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Tonight we're here with our Waterfront fiscal year 2014 and 2015 operating budget recommendations. Real quick, just looking at the overall budget that is proposed, we're proposing that it increase by 2.9% for fiscal year 2014 and decrease slightly down minus 0.19% in fiscal year 2015. Presentation outline. I'm going to first run through the fiscal year 14 and fiscal year 15 expenditures that are proposed. I'll then go over the recommended fee adjustments, our fiscal year 14 and fiscal year 15 revenue proposals, or projections, I should say. I'll go over some P3 highlights, which is our performance program at the city, and then I'll go over the remaining budget schedule, basically what's left. First off, real quick budget process. You folks have been very involved with this, obviously, going back as far, actually, to June when we met. But this is up on the screen tonight. In November, you had a Harbor Commission review of the 6-year capital plan. In January, I presented you with the mid-year budget review. On February 12th, we had a budget committee review of the fiscal year 14 and 15 budget. On the 21st, last month, I presented to you a budget overview. Earlier this week, on Monday, we had our city administrator and finance department review of the draft budget submittal, and that went very well. And then tonight we are here with our budget recommendations. So a lot of work has gone into this. Thank you all for all the work that you've put into this so far. We're getting there. We're not quite there, but we're getting there. First off, fiscal year 14 expenditures by program, and this is a two-part slide. You'll see at the top we start off with our administration and community relations. Overall, you'll see about $107,000 increase, and I talked about this last month at the February Harbor Commission meeting. A good part of that is due to insurance increases, particularly in this regards regarding Stearns Wharf. Makes up a good part of our insurance increase. I mentioned last month that an appraisal was done. They go through the city and appraise all the properties. Stearns Wharf was appraised in fiscal year 2011, but it doesn't hit the books until this coming fiscal year. So it takes a while to hit, and we're getting that hit this coming year. Property management, both property management and financial management, you'll see large increases, although rather small programs. As far as property management is concerned, that's a $107,000 increase, or 37%. That is due to cruise ships and the money what it costs us to have those cruise ships. I think there's a misperception out there that those are free. That is not the case. For a number of years, we've been trying to put a figure on this, and we've been tracking our figures. We have it down pretty well now on a per cruise ship basis. That includes fees we pay to MTD to increase their shuttle service for people coming off of the various ships. That also includes a permit fee from Public Works regarding the lane changes out there on Cabrillo Boulevard. And it also includes, I'm missing one, additional expenditures for the downtown organization as they help with the host tent and setting all that up. So these are all costs that go into the cruise ships. As far as financial management is concerned, we talked about this last month. That's a $50,000 increase. $40,000 of that is due to increased bank fees as we have implemented. Well, first of all, just people are generally using their bank cards, their credit cards more often as opposed to cash, as well as our Luke systems. Those also accept cash. And we found recently, I believe, upwards of 50% of the payments we receive on the new Luke parking systems are with debit or credit cards. Our parking services expenditures are due to basically be level for next year. Our harbor patrol goes up slightly at about 3.45%. Our marina management program goes down 10%. That's about a $40,000 decrease, and that's primarily because of the purchase of our marina management software, which we're currently working on. So that expenditure will now be out of that line item. Our harbor maintenance, both harbor maintenance and wharf maintenance, slight increases. And our facilities design and capital stays about the same, a slight increase of 0.17%. Overall, for fiscal year 14, it's proposed a 2.97 increase in expenditures. As far as fiscal year 15 is concerned, slight increases throughout. You'll see administration and community relations up slightly at 2.31%. Property management up about the same, 2.3, as well as financial management up about 2.13%. Parking services expenditures go down about 2.5%. That's primarily due to we won't have that equipment expenditure that we've had in the past with the purchase of these new lukes. That's been kind of a ramp up in that particular program. That will be, at least as far as lukes are concerned, completed. Again, we have 13 of them online now. Our harbor patrol goes up slightly at 2.19%. Marina management up 3.72%. That's about $11,000. Harbor maintenance nearly even. Wharf maintenance up slightly, 2.12%. And our facility design and capital, it is proposed to be down 4%. And that's primarily just the cost of our projects. That we're still doing a lot of projects, just it depends on the magnitude of the project and the cost of the project. So again, fiscal year 14 expenditures up 2.97%. Proposed for fiscal year 15, our expenditures are down 0.19%. Recommended fiscal year 14 and 15 fee adjustments. These were mentioned in the recommendation. The first is the self-pay parking fee. This would be adjusted to $2 per hour. Currently, it stands at $3 for 3 hours. And what this will do is it'll be consistent with all the other waterfront parking lots except the wharf, which is slightly different because there is a validation program out there. But it would bring all the self-pay parking lots in the waterfront to the current rate. It will also bring more flexibility to the public. Right now, again, you have to pay $3 for 3 hours. You may only be there an hour, but you still have to pay it this way. If you're there an hour, it's just 2 hours. Our slip fee is proposed to increase 2%. This is in line again with last year's fee increase, fiscal year 2013. And then our slip transfer fee is proposed to go up $25 per foot, which would bring the overall cost to $350 per foot. But again, for the public, that does not include the 20-foot slips. Our fiscal year 2014 revenue. You'll see our property management proposed to go down 5%. We're being very conservative with property management. Again, I've talked about this the last few months. We had a really warm summer, great weather. We had a great fall. The winter's been a little bit chilly, January and February, but those summer and fall months really brought the people out. Our parking lots were full. The restaurants were full. All the restaurants at mid-year had seen increases over the previous year. But we just can't bank on that weather, especially noting our summers. So what we have done is reduce that 5%. And that also takes into account we're going to receive a balloon payment from the Maritime Museum at the end of this month of about $268,000, which is great. That's a spike. However, what the result of that is a loss of $142,000 per year in lease revenue from the Maritime Museum. So that is gone. We also are still kind of feeling the effects of Decor leaving the past fiscal year, which was another $140,000 cut to the property management program. So we're taking it conservative. As far as financial management is concerned, these are numbers we get from our finance department. So we have no control over those. However, they're predicting a 5% decrease for fiscal year 2014. Our parking services we are projecting that they'll remain about even. We're curious to see how the proposed fee impacts. It could go one way or the other. Again, we want to provide more flexibility for our customers and bring everything in line for our waterfront parking lots. Our marina management program, our revenues are projected to go up about 2.25%, so a slight growth. Overall, for fiscal year 14, that's a decline of about 1.11% as far as revenue is concerned. Our fiscal year 2015 revenue by program, so same slide, new year. Our property management, we are projecting will go up about 2% in fiscal year 15. Our financial management, again, this comes from our finance department, and again, the markets are very fickle. They're projecting about a 4% decrease. Our parking services, our plan is that the Lukes will start to see that gradually increase our revenue based on the Luke program that's been installed in all the waterfront all the self-pay parking lots. So that we're predicting will go up at 2.86%. Our marina management, we're projecting that will go up 2.5% for an overall increase in revenue in fiscal year 2015 of 2.36%, or just under $300,000. This is a little bar chart or graph, total operating revenue versus total operating expense. The good thing is that the revenue is in yellow and stays above the expenses. Fiscal year 13 to 14, you'll see a slight decrease. That pinch point is primarily due to that reduction. The 13 peak, what helps that is the good year we've had, but also the Maritime Museum's balloon payment. And then next year, obviously, the loss of that $142,000 in lease revenue helps take that down a little bit. But from there on out through 2019, we're projecting good revenues versus expenses. P3 is the city's performance program. I believe it's called Paradise Performance Program, P3. And these are some of our highlights for next fiscal year. Under our property management program, we're going to continue to support tenant sales through department-funded marketing and promotions. We do this in a variety of ways, everything from our Harbor and Seafood Festival to brochures. We do what we can to help our tenants out and help get the public down here. Our financial management, one of our performance objectives is to support the city's information systems implementation of the new financial management system. We are in the midst of a major overhaul of the city's entire financial management program. It's a massive undertaking that's going to take a number of years, but we are assisting them with that as best we can. We also will be working with them on our marina management software program. Both of these two existing programs are extremely out of date, and with both of these we hope to be a whole lot more efficient and user-friendly. Harbor Patrol, respond to 96% of in-harbor emergencies within 5 minutes. I think we always hit that mark, and thankfully so, especially when things like the Condor Express catch on fire. Those folks are right there. Marina management, support our Clean Marina program, and just conducting the annual seafloor debris cleanup. And this is one of Mick's programs. This is an amazing program. Last year, this was done on May 5th, so it's just around the corner this year. Had over 40 volunteers hit the docks, and it was the 6th annual Operation Clean Sweep, and they removed a record 3,200 pounds of seafloor junk from beneath fingers E through H in Marina One. And that brings, over the years they've been doing this, the total to 21,200 pounds. That is a lot of junk that Mick and this program pick up off the floor. It's amazing. Facilities maintenance. We'd like to achieve 80% of in-service days for the Ice House through facility upgrades and preventative maintenance. At previous Harbor Commission meetings, I've discussed, and Carl has discussed, the capital program, and one of the capital programs in the coming years to work on that Ice House. This is a very important fixture in the harbor. It helps the fishermen out a tremendous amount, and we'd like to keep that up and running and keep that working harbor working. Facilities design and capital projects. This is Carl's program, and is to complete the preliminary design for phases 5 through 8 of Marina One. He talked briefly about that earlier in tonight's program. So that is another one of our performance objectives. Budget schedule. As you can see, we're getting there. We've had our budget meetings in February. We had our city administrator and finance review meeting earlier this week. We're here today, or tonight, before you with our recommendation. Next on the list would be our council budget work session. That would be held May 13th. And then finally, the city is due to adopt the overall city budget on June 18th. So that is the end of my program, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much for that report. Are there any questions from the commission members? Commissioner Bantlin.
Sure. Thought there would be other questions. Thank you for your report, Brian. Specifically on parking, I notice that it's staying pretty flat projection, and you mentioned we don't know whether it's going to go up or down. Do we have any idea on the average length of stay in the staffed lots that are time stamped, people coming in and out? I'm just curious how many folks actually go to the beach for less than an hour.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Banlin, that's a great question. As for how many people go to the beach for less than an hour, I wouldn't think a whole lot unless they're just down there for a walk or to go to the skate park and watch the skaters. We do have a variety of data we can pull from our existing parking system. I think that will be greatly enhanced by the means of getting this new system. Again, we're on a parking system that's over 15 years old. The company's still around, but they don't make the parts anymore. They've moved on. So with our advancement into this new parking system, we'll be able to pull out all sorts of information like that. I don't have a number off the top of my head. If that's something you want, we could go and dig that up for you.
No, that's fine. I guess, it's good that we're conservative, thinking that it's going to be higher than that. But it's just quite an increase, or it would be quite an increase percentage-wise for the cost if you were staying for over an hour. And so I would think that it would be a correlating increase in the revenue. So just wanted to point that out.
Commissioner Spicer.
Thank you for the presentation. I have great respect for building a budget, and I know how difficult it can be and how onerous the task is. As far as recommendation C and the increase in slip fees, I just have a question. Is slip fee increases, is that something that has happened every year? I've only been on the commission for, this is my 5th year, but I believe it's happened every year since I've been here, and I just wonder if you have that information.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Spicer, back in the old days, we used to do slip fee increases once every blue moon, every 3-4 years or whatever, and there would be a big increase and everybody would come unglued, and then we sort of gradually went to a small incremental increase every year, and I think got the community more used to an annual type increase like we have with all of our leases and so forth, loosely based on the leases are based on the CPI. This 2% increase does represent what the CPI has been running for the last several years. It's been very low. But additionally, our contract with the Department of Boating and Waterways for our loan requires that we do annual slip fee increases.
Commissioner Friedman.
I had a question regarding the increase was it the property management due to the cruise ships? It was about $100,000 for the cost. Do the cruise ships pay for those costs? Because we are getting a per capita fee or a per person fee. But in addition, are they paying that or not?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Friedman, if you're asking in the broadest sense, with this $107,000, does the Waterfront Department still make money? Yes, it does. We do get a per capita fee for the people on the ships. The fees that we pay include the MTD. We also sponsor brochures at a one-time cost, downtown organization costs, as well as public works fees. The cruise ships on their own do pay for the police presence that's required and the safety that's required of the visiting cruise ships.
About how much do you think that we benefited the total positive for the Waterfront Department?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Friedman, that's a great question. It all depends, obviously, on how many ships come here. As I've said in the past, they're a pretty fickle group, and it can turn on a dime. But generally, for each ship, it can vary between, depending on an average size ship, which is the larger ones, probably around $18,000, as has been reported. But then you have to back some of that out in the different costs.
Any other comments? Commissioner Kelly.
I've been wrestling with the budget and our whole process, being the commissioner that set the longest. on the commission, and also, oddly enough, since I've been on the budget committee now for a long time, I forget how long, because when we look at our annual budget, one of the things that we see is that more than 55 or 60% of it is way beyond our control. We really can't touch that. It comes to us from various different departments in the city. And that's understandable because we're just a cog on a big wheel that's turning around. What becomes a little concerning, frustrating is maybe too strong a word, but what becomes a little concerning is when various factions in the city government tend to not support efforts on the part of the Harbor Commission to do everything it can to make the operation as effective as possible, as efficient as possible. The example that I would give would be everything in nature is done in the most efficient means possible. Tiny example from physics. When light, energy passing through air, goes into water, it bends. Why? Because that is the most energy efficient way of moving the energy from one medium to another. It doesn't barrel in straight. Like that, everything that we do should be aimed at the most efficient, economical way of accomplishing something. And so it's frustrating that there are mechanisms in place at the city level which preempt and prevent us from making those recommendations. And when approached, we're simply denied the opportunity to do so. So I just wanted to make that comment because it is going to influence the way I vote this evening.
Thank you for your comment. Any other Commissioner Bantolin?
Thanks for your comments, Commissioner Kelly. I tend to agree with you on the fact that, I think it's the responsibility of the Commission to explore cost savings where possible, especially in light of, raising fees and rates on folks. So, I definitely agree with you there. As far as the slip transfer fee and the slip fees, I tend to defer to the slip holders on the Commission there. I've had some concerns in the past, but like I said, I defer there. On your note, Commissioner Kelly, and I remember you bringing it up, I think, last meeting, and you said you've brought it up several times before. I would be inclined to make a motion when we get to that point to add to our recommendations that Council does look specifically at contracting out landscaping, whether that stays within Parks and Rec or not, that's fine. But I think it's our responsibility to let the council know what we feel, and then it's their responsibility to, make a decision. And whether or not the final staff report that gets to them is different than the Commission's recommendation, that also sometimes happens, so that's okay too. So are we going to be voting on these individually?
Yes, we're going to be voting on each one, A through E, individually.
Okay, then I'll let that happen.
Commissioner Friedman.
Well, I thank both my fellow commissioners for their comments, and I just wanted to acknowledge that I kind of understand where you're going. Frank was a little vague, but I'm sure I'll see where you're going in a couple minutes. But just to acknowledge that I believe that the waterfront is very efficient and very well run, and I want to thank our staff for that. It's extremely well run department from my own personal experiences and from others who've contacted me about it. And I just want to clarify, my understanding with Commissioner Bantolin is that we're not recommending to contract out, but just get more information and compare it to what the current, if I'm understanding you correctly, what the current costs are, and then what those costs would be, so we have that information to make an informed decision. And if that's the case, just getting more information, I'd be inclined to support that.
Yeah, that is the case, and it wouldn't, I wouldn't say an RFP or anything like that, but it would be to, I don't know if solicit bids is the right language. What do you think?
Why don't we talk about that when we get to number E specifically?
That's fine.
If I could recommend that.
I have a question. The graphs show the revenue going up and the expenses going up. Does the revenue going up, does that figure in having a 2% slip fee increase and also the transfer fee increase on an annual basis, that amount?
Madam Chair, when we do our long-range planning for the budget, both on the capital side or on the revenue as well as expenditure side, we generally put in a 2% overall, just to kind of make it go up with the times. But I believe the 2% slip fee, the 2% fee is included in that, yes.
Okay. And the transfer fee also, is that part of that revenue increase?
Madam Chair, Mr. Eidman, do you have that answer?
Yes, Madam Chair, it is included each year. We've excluded the 20-foot slips from that. But expenses, we pretty much budget in the same manner. Salary and benefit expenses at anywhere from 2.5% to 3%, and just generally supplies and services at 2%. So your expenses are always increasing, and so you need to be looking for ways to increase your revenue at the same time, or that line will cross, and you will be in big trouble. I want to go back a little bit to what Commissioner Friedman said in terms of, or what was said by various commissioners in terms of efficiencies and you know, and it was acknowledged that Waterfront does work very hard on being efficient and making the money where we can. And I'd just like to point out one of the performance objectives that I think Brian missed, and that is in parking services. Maybe he caught it and I wasn't listening closely enough. But it says, maintain an annual operating expense below 45% of revenue collected. Okay, so that's our whole parking department, which has grown by leaps and bounds revenue-wise over the last few years. And so what that performance measurement is for every dollar we collect, to keep 45 cents of that, to keep expenses below 45 cents. The reality is right now we're running at 37 cents on the dollar. So 63 cents on the dollar is profit after expenses. I think that's an outstanding example of efficiencies that we're reaching in the parking department, trying to squeeze this out with the Luke systems, and we haven't even seen those come fully on. I mean, they're fully online now, but not for a full year yet. So we try where we can.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Commissioner Kelly.
Yes, I need to clarify because I want the staff to know that the comment was not directed at them. I know all of you. I have known all of you for more than a decade, and it was in no way meant to be any kind of a negative on how hard everybody down in the harbor works or how dedicated they are. I appreciate what you guys do immensely. This was, I was throwing my stone a little higher, if you will.
Commissioner Bantlin.
I want to echo those comments as well. And frankly, some of my issues tonight, with the parking adjustments actually have to do with, I don't know that we actually need the money that I see, the extra money that I see coming in, because we are so efficient. And so I just wanted to give a nod to you on that. And the county recently looked at some beach parking fees that were much less efficient than 37 cents on the dollar. So that is definitely a good job there. So thank you.
Any other commissioner comments? I guess not. I guess then at the point we should vote on the individual items. Jeanette, would you want to read them, or how are we going to do this? Receive, or do you want me to read it, or how we're going to vote individual items?
Madam Chair, I think we can take A off the list because you've received the presentation.
Right, well, B through E.
I think B and C we could group together as being items involving slip-related fees, which would potentially conflict slip holders out of voting on those items. They could be taken individually, B and C, or just together. And then all of the commissioners certainly can vote on D and E. So that's just the recommendation of how we could approach that.
Any thoughts on this? I mean, Commissioner Kelly?
Yes, I would say that the slip holders, since the slip fee increase is only 2%, and we're actually bound by the contracts that we did with the Department of Boating and Waterway, that is almost a de facto that we have to do it. Otherwise, we're starting to violate a contract. And it doesn't come anywhere near, for myself, a $327 slip fee. If I do 2% of that, I'm at $6.54 a month times 12, $78.48. I'm so far below the threshold where it's a conflict. I can vote. It becomes a conflict, a potential conflict on B as a slip holder. If someone were wanting to acquire a proprietary interest in the slip, usually the person doing the acquisition makes the payment, but doesn't have to be that way. So I would have to recuse myself from B.
Okay, so then I think we should vote individually on B, individually on C, and okay. I guess should read the entire thing. For B, recommend approval of a $25 per linear foot slip transfer fee increase in fiscal year 2014 and fiscal year 2015 on all slip categories except 20-foot slips. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? And abstaining? 1, 2, 3 abstentions. So 4 in
Yeah,
favor.
it's actually recused. There's a difference between abstaining,
Abstaining and recused. We don't even get to say anything. We're out.
All right. Okay. 4 in favor, 3 recused.
There you go.
Okay. Items number C, recommend approval of a 2% slip fee increase in fiscal year 2014 and fiscal year 2015. All those in favor? Oh, anyone opposed? 1 opposed. Recusing? 1 recused.
And I'll abstain.
And 1 abstained, okay.
Oh, no, recuse?
Recused, apparently.
We might want to do a roll call on
Yeah,
that.
why don't we?
Okay, all right. Mr. Friedman.
Just a point of clarification.
Okay.
So we read these recommendations, should somebody make a motion and then it's seconded and then we vote on it, or bypassing that?
Well,
Is
it's
that
just
correct protocol?
bypassing it, but I
Okay,
guess,
okay. I'm just-
sorry about that.
No, I'm just trying to
Okay.
make sure that we're doing it right, so
All right.
somebody in the future can't come back and say.
You gotta- what's your-
Oh, I'm sorry.
Glad you did it, too.
Okay, so we need a motion on item C, and we'll do a roll call.
Okay.
Madam Chair, just a point of clarification. Scott, I was, and I know we probably covered it. On C, is it absolutely part of our DBAW grant that we have to continuously raise our slip fees annually, or is it that we have to stay above a certain level overall on the income in the waterfront?
Commissioner Kelly, it's written into the loan document that we need to raise it by a minimum of the CPI increase annually. And they don't specify which index you choose. They leave it up to us to do that. January would be a wise one to pick, where I believe it was right around 2%. It hasn't been a factor because the CPI has been so low.
Okay.
So, I'm not sure where we are.
Okay, I believe what we should do is go back to recommendation B.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have a
About
motion.
and get a motion and a second.
Okay.
And then get
Okay.
the vote on that.
And can I suggest that we do voice vote on all of them, roll call, just on everything? So we'll run through the list of everybody.
Okay, a motion, anybody want to make a motion
I'll
on
move
B?
item B.
And a second.
We're going to redo it.
We're redoing it.
We didn't.
And a roll call vote apparently on each of these. Commissioner Friedman?
Aye.
Kelly? Spicer?
Aye.
Kramer, me? Aye.
Recuse?
Van Slyne? Webb?
And a motion on item number C. Anybody?
I'll move it.
Second. Anyone seconding? Second. All those in favor? Commissioner Friedman?
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly?
Aye, with the stipulation that we have to vote yes. Otherwise, we default on a contract.
Commissioner Spicer?
Nay.
Kramer, aye. Commissioner Sloan?
Recuse.
Commissioner Vangeline? Aye. Commissioner Webb? Okay, and item number D. Anybody, recommend approval, somebody want to make a motion for D?
I have a question before, on
Okay,
that,
sure.
on that specific thing before we do. So what we're doing is we're bringing the self-pay lots up with parity with the Harbor Main, is that, did I hear that earlier?
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
So we're bringing the self-pay lots up with parity with the Harbor Main lot, is that?
Correct. Self-pay lots will all be $2 an hour, similar to Ledbetter and Harbor, Maine.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone want to make a motion on D and to read it?
I will.
Okay, you will what?
Oh, I will make a recommendation that we approve item D.
Okay.
Seconded.
And Commissioner Friedman?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Spicer?
Aye.
Kramer, aye.
Aye.
Vangeline?
I don't think we have enough info, so I'm going to abstain.
And Commissioner Webb? And anyone want to, did you get that? Anyone want to make a motion on item number E and to forward this recommendation?
Actually, if I can, I'd like to make a recommendation that we forward the proposed fiscal year 2014 and 15 budget with the addition or change that we recommend to council that they put out to competitive bid landscaping services for the waterfront department.
I'll second that. All those in favor?
Can I just make one comment before we vote? As part of whatever goes out there, I think it's really important that we look at extenuating circumstances that go outside of the normal contract, because there are instances when if you go out and you contract out and you have a specific contract, but then you have emergencies and you're stuck with that contract, that it can actually cost you more. And being that we do have storms every couple of years and we haven't had for a while, I just want to be sure that we have that information whenever we get that back.
Vote on the motion. All in favor? Friedman?
Aye.
Kelly?
With the stipulation, I will vote aye.
Commissioner Spicer?
Aye.
Kramer, aye.
Aye.
Vangeline? Commissioner Webb? Okay. So, on now.
We have the lottery.
Yeah, on now to the lottery. Jeanette, would you read the staff recommendation, please, when you get a chance?
Recommendation that Harbor Commission, via the chair, conduct a general lottery drawing to select and rank prospective mooring permittees in the East Beach mooring area.
Is Mr. Conlon? You gonna
Yes.
describe? Okay.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, and I'll be brief because I know we want to get to the lottery drawing. As you know, the permitted mooring area east of Stearns Wharf has existed and been permitted since 2006. It includes 44 mooring sites, 21 of which are available. Those are the ones in the white circles. The occupied ones are in the hatched circles. You can see two on the left-hand side separated by one mooring site that are a little darker than the others, and those are actually been taken out of the mooring area as a whole. It used to be 46 sites. We found seafloor debris in those two sites that make them untenable for mooring sites. So in accordance with, and I apologize, there are 23, and we're holding a lottery for the 21 remaining spots. So in accordance with City Council policy, the Waterfront Department is enabled and allowed, if you will, to undertake a lottery anytime the number of permitted moorings in the mooring field gets to 30 or fewer. And we have had more lotteries in 2006, 7, 2010, and 2011. So this will actually be the 5th mooring lottery we've had. One of the hang-ups in the last couple of years, as you may remember, is we sort of had to weed out the C-Flex moorings, those bungee cord style moorings. We've got all but 2 of them out of the mooring area. We're very hopeful that with the this mooring lottery and the assignment of these sites that will fill out the mooring area, and it'll be what we have always planned it and expected it to be. So overall, we received 56 lottery applications during an advertised window period that ended on March 4th. We advertised in several regional newspapers and in a yachting and boating magazine, the Log magazine. And so after the chair draws the tickets, and I believe she's just going to read the serial number on the tickets, and probably 4 or 5 of us will be writing those down. Plus, we'll have video back up tomorrow to review it if we have to. We will rank all of the applicants who have filled out and sent in lottery participation request forms. And once we get those all in a line and ranked, staff will begin contacting the individuals who were ranked nearest to the top and corresponding to the vessel sizes they have on their applications, their initial applications, that is, their mooring, their lottery participation form applications has a line where they write the size of the boat they have in mind, so that they don't see the map now and change, the size of the boat and so forth. So we will take the top ranked applicants, and we will get the word out to them, and I will talk to them, hopefully one-on-one in the office, but if they're not in town, I will communicate with them, and we will finalize their applications, and the ones that are finalized will have 90 days to quote-unquote prove up with a vessel and a mooring on the site, and we will proceed, and we'll certainly report back to you as to how that goes over the next 3 to 4 months. With that, Madam Chair, I would encourage you to begin the lottery drawing, and we will take notes.
Thank you. We will begin. All right, open the envelope.
Little jar.
Little jar, no jar. Okay. All right.
Probably somebody,
Maybe we should.
somebody else should put them in.
Yeah, well, if you want to,
Okay. You want to hand me the jar?
yeah, we're going to put them in the top here so that.
Oh, okay.
Maybe scatter them around in there somehow. Maybe do it with your hand.
Madam Chair, are you ready?
Hey, you want to put it in here. So that there's nothing else in this container?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Nothing up my sleeve.
Only there's just tickets. All right, who's going to count?
Yeah, we're
You're
right.
right.
You got
Okay,
plenty
all
of
right,
room.
okay.
First pick.
All right, okay. Glasses. 235370.
Madam Chair, I think if you just read the last 3 numbers, that'll be okay.
Okay. 370.
And that is Robert Wells.
Okay, everybody next. 401.
That's Ryan Westerhoff.
407.
That is Jack Young.
380.
That is Christine Bennett.
389.
That is Timothy Foster.
392.
That is Palmer Robinson.
398.
That's Kenneth Boswich.
368.
Will Carson.
369.
Michael Malecki.
394.
Richard Brunowski.
360.
Robert Daniel.
414.
David Sanger.
413.
Scott Summer.
396.
Israel Hutt.
412.
Phil Gerard.
393.
Javier Moreno.
374.
Jeremy Gove.
381.
Michael D. Humboldt.
409.
Julie Pryor.
382.
Devin Gillahan.
410.
Patricia Earle.
366.
Jacques Montero.
384.
Michael McGuire.
397.
Austin Artis.
411.
Max Danishman.
388.
Bob Earl.
390.
Bruno Ruiz.
403.
Cheryl Schwartzwalter.
399.
Benjamin Lakish.
404.
Bill Schwartzwalter.
387.
Greg Marks.
375.
Mike Schimmer.
365.
Richard Kronger.
363.
Gene Foss.
405.
Richard Jorgensen.
402.
Cindy Brackett.
386.
Carol Spinelli.
364.
Terrence Holt.
378.
Stace Cheverez.
406.
Martha McGuire.
395.
Kenneth Brunowski.
391.
Robert Trukowski.
367.
Mark James Mandel.
383.
David Brown.
408.
Ruby Burden.
385.
Amelia Hanover.
373.
Travis Briefus.
371.
Gary Hunt.
372.
Charles Braffett.
362.
James Nichols.
376.
David Williams.
379.
Carl Laubacker.
361.
Hannah Warwick.
415.
Hendrik Fink.
400.
Robert Lurie.
And last but not least, 377.
Donnie Brown.
That empties the container.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, thank you very much. I know it was a little arduous. I really appreciate it. It helps us. Thanks very much. We'll proceed.
Commissioner Sloan deserves an award.
I apologize to anybody whose name I didn't pronounce correctly.
I think that concludes this item. And Commissioner to staff communication, are there any?
Nothing from staff.
Mr. Bandlin?
I had one item, and this actually just sort of came up today at county's APCD meeting, which is their air pollution control district. And one of the items that came up is they signed on, or they sent a letter up to Sacramento asking that they possibly use some funds from Cap and Trade to institute a slow steaming program along the coast. I realize we have no jurisdiction, the county has no jurisdiction in that. I just wondered if we may agendize it for a future meeting to possibly send that letter. We don't have a ton of emissions or freight really coming into the harbor, but we do have some cruise liners that have been coming in now, so just kind of wanted to make you aware of that. Also, it's kind of a neat program. I heard a presentation from the environmental officer from Maersk, which is one of the largest, if not the largest, shippers in the world. And slow steaming helps them actually save money. It's good for the environment. It helps cut down on whale strikes. And so it's not immediately in our purview, but just wanted to kind of mention that and see if it might be tossed on a future agenda. Thank you.
I met this afternoon with the other advisory commissions and the semi-annual process that people, chairs and vice chairs, if they wish to get together and talk. There were very few comments. There was only one comment about one question about the parking, and it went fine. So, any comments from the staff?
No comments, Madam Chair.
And then I guess do you have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.